Absolutely love visiting with this guy, a Tennessee alum and one of the best in the biz, author, host. He does it all. Ryan McGee. Ryan, how are you, sir?
I'm good, man. You never say no. That's the key. Everybody's like, "You're so busy." I'm like, "Yes," because if I say no, somebody else is going to say yes, and they won't call again. So yeah, that's the deal.
You're also the best. I steal your dad jokes on Twitter that you leave for your kids.
Well, it's funny. My daughter just graduated high school, and so we've had the conversation. Like, what do I keep doing the dad jokes or not? And I think if I don't do them, she'll be mad at me. So we'll see.
I've got one for you.
Okay.
Do you know Stephen King's son name is Joe? And I'm not joking.
That's I'm stealing that. Totally stealing it. That's the thing, too. People are like, where do you come up with them? In the beginning, I would come up with them, but then people started sending them to me, like on Twitter. And so I just was shamelessly just take it and post it and act like it was my own. So, yeah.
It's called sampling.
Well, there's a lot of people in this room that do that anyway. So I was like, I do dad jokes.
Tell me about Tennessee.
Yeah.
You and I have seen some really lean years.
Yes.
But we go back to the 90s and early 2000s when they were pretty special.
Yeah.
My, what a ride it's been, and I think they've got an answer in Josh Heupel. What do you think?
I do too, and Danny White, and I would even go to Donde Plowman, the chancellor. You see the way that she and Danny White handled this, this NCAA stuff. The only reason that kept in the postseason was because the chancellor and the athletic director got out ahead of all of this, and so it is. You cannot overstate the importance of the chancellor, the athletic director, and the head on the same page. You just can't. And, what you and I have seen over the years is that when the athletic director and the coach don't see eye to eye, or the chancellor and the athletic director don't see eye to eye, or any one piece of that, there have been years where none of the three of them saw eye to eye. And so when everybody is on the same page and they know that we need to have discussions about things, it makes all the difference in the world. And so that's why I have confidence. And I do think Heupel's the guy. And there's a confidence about him. No one's ever questioned his ability to move the football. The only question left to be answered is, can you sustain it long term? How good of a coach are you without Hendon Hooker behind center? There's still a lot of that out there, but I have confidence that you can keep this rolling.
Now, and I wonder too, my question with Josh Heupel is the high school recruiting.
Yeah.
Does that take the next step? Because I don't know if you can live on the transfer portal forever. Maybe you can, but I don't know that.
You can't live off of it long term. It's funny because I've had this conversation with a lot of coaches this week, and what they've said is you have to find your balance. If you're Georgia, you don't need it at all. And they don't really use it. If the key of the transfer portal should be, and Brian Kelly said this to us, the key to the transfer portal should be getting the guys you need to fill a couple of holes. You don't need it to fill your entire roster. Now, in the short term, yeah. In the short term, if however many guys transferred out, they're transferred out, and you got to replace that many spots, yeah, you got to ride that portal, hard as you can ride it. But the goal is to get to you're plugging holes with the portal as opposed to and losing guys in small numbers to the portal as opposed to trying to cover big numbers, trying to keep 15 guys from leaving while trying to plug 17 spots, Mm-hmm. And so, again, that's a long-term answer, and we don't know. And it's all still so new, and there's no rules, right? And so what's this going to look like 3 years from now? I have no idea. So it's a really long way of saying that I think you're right. I think if there's one thing you need to work on is the high school recruiting. But you know what helps with that? Is winning 11, 12 games a year,
True.
And being in the national conversation.
What is your stance on the SEC potentially adding more teams and even a step further having a super conference that would be different from what we call Division I now?
My father was a long time college football official, but he also was a long time college administrator. That was his day job. He was a Division II college president, Wingate University in North Carolina, and he used to sit on these NCAA committees 20 years ago. And he would be the D2 rep, and then it would be Father whomever from Notre Dame, and it would be Gordon Gee from Ohio State, and it would be all these presidents from all these other big schools. And my dad would come home and say, they're all going to break away one day. And so I've always in my mind.
How long ago was this?
25 years.
Wow.
I wrote a story in ESPN the magazine I had to go back and look it up. I wrote a story in ESPN magazine. It was at least a decade ago, and it was about that. About one day, it's all going to super conferences, and maybe a super conference. And it's the history of college sports, right? I mean, for folks that don't know, the NIAA used to run everything, and the NAIA has its office is still across the street from the old NCAA offices in Kansas City because the NCAA went across the street and started their own deal because they didn't like how the NAIA was doing things. And so one day something like that is going to happen. Only with football. You know, the NCAA, no one wants to run the championships. No one wants to do all these things. But there will be some form of the NCAA. But football-wise, I think that's coming. I don't like it. I mean, I don't. What I worry about is, and I've written these stories before. I was having this conversation a minute ago. You know, I covered motorsports forever. And what did NASCAR do? They were making so much money in the 2000s that they could make a lot of really bad decisions, and it didn't matter. Like, they didn't know they were making bad decisions. And I worked at NASCAR for a couple of years, and Brett Yormark, new commissioner of the Big 12, was one of the people in the room making the decisions. And he'll tell you, if you get too far away from your identity, you don't have an identity. And so if you make these decisions assuming that the loyalists are just going to continue to be loyalists, you better be careful, because one day you'll wake up, and if they don't recognize their sport anymore, they'll go find something else to do. And it's hard to wrap your brain around that. But, you know, if you create a world where Tennessee and Alabama aren't playing every year, and you create a world where, you know, the possibility of a big cross-conference game in November goes away or whatever, and now the playoffs got all this, and the season starts in the middle of August and it ends at the end of January, I don't even know what that is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that doesn't like college football to me. And so that's what you got to be careful with. So that's a really long way of saying change is inevitable. If you're Greg Sankey, you have to take Texas and Oklahoma, or you get fired. I mean, if they are expressing interest, you have to take them. I get that, but you also have to recognize where do you slow down a little bit, because if you just keep making decision after decision after decision after decision, you can't assume that the old folks with the gray hair that pay for everything will stick around, right?
True. Okay, so let me ask you this. If you were the czar of college football, would you have stopped it at the BCS? Would you have stopped at the 4-game playoff, now the 12-game playoff? Obviously, you wouldn't go bigger based on what you said. Where would you have stopped?
I like a divisible number. I don't like buys. I think buys are NFL. My biggest thing is I like the NFL fine. I'm a college football guy. What I don't like is I don't like for my Saturdays to look like Sundays. If I wanted to watch Sunday football, I watch Sunday football. I don't. I watch Saturday football. And when you start talking about buys in a playoff, and you start talking about essentially wild cards, and you start talking about, you know, a national conference that's divided down the middle, it's the NFL. Mm-hmm. And a season that starts, you know, in August and ends in January, that's the NFL. And that's not what I want. I want Saturday football. And so that's the thing, you know, when bowl games no longer are a thing, and it all just feeds into a playoff, that's the NFL. Yep. And I don't want to watch the NFL. And so I don't think it's going to fully get there. At least I hope. I have all the confidence in the world, Greg Sankey. But you also have to do the things that you need to do to make sure that you survive and that you don't become the ACC. And the conversations are we even going to be here 5 years from now? And so I get it, but it's just don't forget. To me, that's Amen. The challenge. Yeah.
Are there any other schools that if they came calling, you feel like Greg Sankey would have to take?
I mean, I live in North Carolina. I was born in North Carolina, raised in North Carolina. There's all this noise now about North Carolina or Clemson or some of these. But at the end of the day, what I've learned is I'm in Florida State. But what I've learned is that it's about new markets. But I also know that in the SEC, there is a super, super high regard for the footprint. You know, you add Oklahoma and Texas, you really only went about 90 miles west. That's it.
Yep.
You know, it's not what the Big Ten did, which I hate so much. I get it. I know why they did it.
I hate it as well.
Yeah, I hate it. And everybody on the West Coast, USC and UCLA fans hate it. And so, if I'm not saying this is going to happen, but I mean, if the University of North Carolina comes calling, you got to answer that phone call. It is one of the most recognizable brands in collegiate athletics. The problem North Carolina would have is is that they're used to kind of being the Alabama of their conference, or the USC or the Ohio State. Everything kind of runs through them ultimately, right? That's how they feel. And they're not going to like sitting in a room full of people that don't know anything about them. But if UNC calls, you have to return that phone call. You have to. You're adding a whole other state. You're adding a whole other market. You're adding a super high brand name. And who the second team is, I don't know. I mean, Virginia Tech, I don't know.
Maybe Notre Dame.
Maybe Notre Dame. But Notre Dame's a whole other thing.
That's right. Let me ask you this last thing. We're about the same age. The first Tennessee player I remember being a fan of was Johnny Jones, running back.
Yeah.
Who's the first Tennessee player you remember tugged at your heart?
Willie Gault.
Willie Gault.
Willie Gault. I ran track, so I loved Willie because Willie wasn't just, Willie ran in the Olympics. Willie at one time was a world record holder. So for me, I love like Ronaldo Nehemiah and James Jett at West Virginia. I love those guys, the crossover guys. But yeah, Willie Gault was my guy. I remember watching Tennessee on a Saturday afternoon. Again, I grew up in the Carolinas, and watching Tennessee on a Saturday afternoon on the old turf, and Willie's dressed head to toe in orange, running against that green turf, and he looked like a comet. I mean, it was unbelievable. I mean, Johnny Majors is my all-time favorite Vol, always will be. But Willie was the first one. I was like, look at this guy. I mean, it looked like a blur on that old tube TV. Yeah. It was a blur, right? He was my guy. Yeah.
Great stuff. You got books out left and right.
Yeah.
Tell us about how people can follow your work.
Got a new one, Welcome to the Circus of Baseball. It's about the right out of Tennessee. I got a job as a $100 a week intern for the Asheville Tourists, just over the state line over in Asheville. And I wrote a book about the summer I worked for the Asheville. It was the summer in between college and when I started ESPN. And, we all have these jobs, right? $100 a week, broke, most fun I ever had, right? Living in a retirement home because the only apartment we could afford, but it was the best, most fun I ever had. And it was, almost got killed by the tarp, almost got drowned by a Dairy Queen machine. That was the summer Michael Jordan played minor league baseball. It was the summer of O.J. Simpson. They shot the movie Richie Rich in Asheville when we were there. Oh, it's like Forrest Gump. Like I'm interacting with all these people. Yeah, welcome to the Circus of Baseball. If you love America and you love baseball, Knoxville Smokies get a couple shout outs in there.
Nice.
Yeah. Wow. I'm so romantic. My first real date with my wife was I took her to Bill Meyer Stadium to see Carlos Delgado play for the Knoxville. I guess it might be the Blue Jays then. But
it's a good cheap date right
there. You go, dude. $5.
He is Ryan McGee, Off the Hook Sports.